It was just another ordinary day in the small town of Maplewood, or so everyone thought. The sun was shining bright in the big blue sky, making everything look happy and warm. Birds were chirping their little songs, hopping from tree to tree. The train tracks that ran through the middle of town were quiet, for now. They stretched out long and shiny, like a silver snake sleeping in the sun. Everything seemed peaceful, like nothing could go wrong. But oh boy, were people wrong. No one knew the truth about what was hiding in plain sight, waiting to jump out and surprise them all. Now, let me tell you about someone very special. His name was Rusty, and he was no ordinary dog. Nope. Rusty was a big, strong German shepherd with shiny brown and black fur that glowed in the sunlight. His eyes were bright and kind, and his tail wagged like a happy flag whenever he saw someone he liked. Rusty had a heart of gold, which means he was super nice to everyone. He lived with the Dawson family, who owned the only bakery in Maplewood. Every morning, Rusty would sit outside the bakery door, watching people walk by. Kids would run up to pet him, and old folks would smile and say, "Good boy, Rusty." Even the grumpy mailman, who never smiled at anyone, would give Rusty a little pat on the head. Everyone in Maplewood loved Rusty well, almost everyone. See, here's the big secret, Rusty had an enemy. Yep, a real-life bad guy. This enemy wasn't just someone who didn't like dogs. Oh no, this enemy wanted Rusty gone for good. And guess what? This enemy wasn't far away. In fact, they were right there in Maplewood, hiding in the shadows, making a mean plan. And today, that enemy was about to strike. Can you imagine that? A big, sweet dog like Rusty, in danger? It sounds scary, doesn't it? But don't worry, because this story has a big surprise coming, and it's going to blow your mind. Now, before I tell you more, let's talk about someone else. Someone tiny. Someone who giggles a lot. Someone who can't even walk very well yet. Her name was Lily, and she was a baby. Yep, a baby. Lily was only 18 months old, which means she was super small. She had big, curious eyes that sparkled like stars, and a smile that made everyone happy. Lily was the youngest kid in the Dawson family, and guess who her best friend was? You got it, Rusty. Every day, Lily would sit in her stroller outside the bakery, clapping her little hands and giggling when Rusty licked her face. She loved him so much, she even learned to say woof, before she could say mama or dada. Isn't that cute? But here's the crazy part: no one, and I mean no one, could have guessed that this tiny, giggling baby named Lily would be the one to turn everything upside down. Yep, a baby. Sounds impossible, right? I mean, how could a little kid who can't even talk properly save the day? Well, just wait, because the story is about to get wild. It's going to be full of twists and turns, like a roller coaster ride, and you're not going to want to miss a single second of it. Oh, and before I forget, let me know in the comments, have you ever seen a dog in danger? Maybe your dog got stuck somewhere, or maybe you saw a puppy who needed help. Or how about this, have you ever seen a baby being a hero? I bet you haven't seen anything like what's coming in the story. Drop your answers in the comments below, I love hearing from you. And if you're ready for more stories like this, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around, because things are about to get super exciting. Okay, back to Maplewood. Let's paint a picture of this little town, so you can see it in your head. Maplewood wasn't a big city with tall buildings and noisy cars. Nope, it was a small, cozy place where everyone knew everyone else. There were cute little houses with flowers in the yards, a park with a shiny slide, and a big clock tower that went ding-dong every hour. The bakery, where Rusty and the Dawsons lived, was right in the middle of town. It had a red door and a sign that said, "Dawson's Delicious Treats." Inside, the air smelled like warm cookies, fresh bread, and sweet pies. People would line up every morning just to get a taste. Rusty loved sitting outside that red door, watching the world go by. He'd wag his tail at the kids on their bikes, bark hello to the lady who walked her tiny dog, and even chase away pesky squirrels who tried to steal crumbs. To everyone in Maplewood, Rusty was like a big, furry superhero. But to his secret enemy, Rusty was trouble. Big trouble. Who was this enemy, you ask? Well, I'm not going to tell you everything just yet, where's the fun in that? But I'll give you a little hint. This enemy wasn't a monster or a ghost. Nope, they were a person, someone who walked around Maplewood every day, pretending to be normal. But deep down, they had a heart full of mean ideas. And their meanest idea of all? Getting rid of Rusty, once and for all. Why would someone want to hurt a dog as nice as Rusty? That's a big question, and the answer is coming soon, I promise. But for now, just imagine this, a peaceful little town, a happy dog, a giggling baby, and a bad guy hiding in the shadows. It's like the start of a big adventure, right? And adventures always have surprises, don't they? So, here's what I want you to do. Picture Rusty sitting outside the bakery, his tail wagging like crazy. Picture Lily in her stroller, clapping her hands and saying, "Woof." Picture the train tracks, all quiet and shiny, but with something dangerous coming closer. And picture that secret enemy, sneaking around, thinking no one will ever catch them. Can you see it? Good. Because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you're going to be on the edge of your seat, waiting to see what happens next. Oh, and one more thing, don't forget to tell me in the comments, what would you do if your dog was in danger? Would you be brave like Rusty? Or smart like Lily? I can't wait to hear your ideas. And remember, hit that subscribe button if you want more stories that make your heart race and your jaw drop. Ready? Let's keep going, this is going to be wild. Rusty wasn't just any dog. Nope, not at all. He was a very special dog, and he belonged to the Dawson family, the nicest people in Maplewood. The Dawsons ran the town's only bakery, and oh boy, was it a busy place. Every morning, the bakery smelled like warm cookies, sweet pies, and fresh bread. People would line up outside the red door, waiting to buy their favorite treats. And guess who was always there, right by the door, making everyone smile? You got it, Rusty, the big, strong German shepherd with the wagging tail. Every single morning, Rusty would sit outside the bakery, his shiny fur glowing in the sunlight. His tail would go swish swish, like a happy broom sweeping the ground. He'd wag it at everyone who walked by, as if to say, "Hello, friends." Kids loved him so much, they'd run up and hug him, giggling when he licked their faces. Old folks adored him, too. They'd stop to pet his head and say, "Good boy, Rusty. You make my day happy." Even the grumpy mailman, who never smiled at anyone, couldn't help but smile at Rusty. He'd grumble, "You're the only one who doesn't annoy me, dog," and give Rusty a little pat on the head. Rusty was like the king of Maplewood, loved by almost everyone. But here's the scary part, not everyone liked Rusty's cheerful spirit. Nope, not at all. There was one person in Maplewood who didn't like Rusty one bit. In fact, this person hated Rusty so much, they wanted him gone for good. Who was this mean person, you ask? Well, let me tell you about him. His name was Mr. Grimsby, and he was the meanest man in Maplewood. Everyone in town knew to stay away from him, because he was always grumpy and rude. He'd yell at kids for playing too loud, scare away birds from his yard, and even kick rocks just because he was mad. Yep, Mr. Grimsby was not a nice guy at all. Now, Mr. Grimsby owned the land right next to the bakery. On that land, he had his own store, a little shop where he sold boring things like nails, hammers, and old tools. But guess what? Hardly anyone ever went to Mr. Grimsby's store. Why? Because everyone was too busy going to the bakery. The bakery was full of happy people, laughing and eating yummy treats, while Mr. Grimsby's store looked like a ghost town, all quiet and empty. And oh boy, did that make Mr. Grimsby mad. He'd stand in his doorway, glaring at the bakery, his face red with anger. "Why do they get all the customers?" he'd grumble to himself. "It's not fair." But here's the worst part, Mr. Grimsby didn't just hate the Dawson family. Nope, he hated someone else even more. Guess who he blamed the most for all his troubles? You got it, Rusty. Mr. Grimsby thought Rusty was the reason everyone went to the bakery. He'd watch Rusty sitting outside, wagging his tail and making people smile, and he'd think, "That mangy mutt brings in too many customers. People see that silly dog and think the bakery is the best place in town. Well, I'll show them who's boss around here." Mr. Grimsby wasn't just mad, though. Oh no, he was sneaky, too. He started making a plan, a mean, nasty plan to get rid of Rusty once and for all. He'd sit in his dark, dusty store, rubbing his hands together and smiling a wicked smile. If that dog is gone, he'd whisper to himself, the bakery won't be so popular anymore. People will come to my store instead. Ha! Mr. Grimsby's eyes would gleam with a bad idea, like a cat watching a mouse. He didn't care that Rusty was nice. He didn't care that Rusty made people happy. All he cared about was winning, even if it meant doing something really, really bad. One chilly afternoon, while the Dawsons were busy baking pies inside the bakery, Mr. Grimsby saw his chance. The bakery was full of people, and the Dawsons were running around, carrying trays of cookies and pouring hot chocolate. No one was watching Rusty, who was napping by the bakery door. His big head was resting on his paws, his eyes closed, and his tail was still, just for a moment. Rusty looked so peaceful, like he didn't have a care in the world. But oh boy, was trouble coming his way. Mr. Grimsby sneaked out of his store, looking left and right to make sure no one saw him. He had a rope in his hands, a long, rough rope that he'd been hiding in his store. He tiptoed over to Rusty, moving as quiet as a shadow. Rusty didn't even wake up. He was dreaming of chasing squirrels and eating treats. Mr. Grimsby slipped the rope around Rusty's neck, tying it tight. "Time to get rid of you, dog," he hissed, his voice low and mean. His eyes gleamed with a wicked plan, like a bad guy in a movie. Rusty opened his eyes, confused, and let out a little whimper, but Mr. Grimsby didn't care. He yanked the rope hard, pulling Rusty away from the bakery door. Poor Rusty didn't know what was happening. His big paws dragged on the ground as Mr. Grimsby pulled him down the street. Rusty whimpered again, louder this time, but no one heard him over the noise of the bakery. Mr. Grimsby dragged Rusty all the way to the edge of town, to the railway tracks that ran through Maplewood. The tracks were shiny and cold, stretching out far into the distance. They looked quiet and empty now, but oh boy, were they dangerous. Mr. Grimsby had a plan, a terrible, awful plan. He tied Rusty to the tracks with a thick chain, wrapping it tight around Rusty's body so he couldn't move. Rusty whimpered and pulled, but the chain was too strong. He was stuck. Mr. Grimsby stepped back, laughing a mean, nasty laugh. "Let's see how popular you are now," he said, his voice full of hate. Then he turned and walked away, leaving Rusty all alone on the tracks. Poor Rusty barked and barked, but no one could hear him. The wind was blowing, the birds were singing, and the train tracks were quiet, for now. But oh boy, was something scary coming. Here's the big twist, though little did Mr. Grimsby know, someone was watching. Someone small. Someone who didn't even know how to talk yet. Someone who couldn't walk very well, either. But this someone had a heart big enough to change everything. Can you guess who it was? I bet you can. It was a tiny, giggling baby named Lily, and she was about to do something so brave, it would surprise everyone in Maplewood. But we'll talk more about her soon. For now, just imagine Rusty, all alone on the tracks, and Mr. Grimsby, thinking he'd won. What do you think happens next? Hold on tight, because the story is about to get wild. Back at the bakery, things were starting to get busy, really busy. The Dawsons were running around inside, carrying trays of hot cookies, pouring cups of hot chocolate, and wrapping up pies for customers. The bakery smelled so good, like sugar and cinnamon, and the line of people outside was getting longer and longer. Everyone was happy, chatting, and laughing. But then, something felt wrong. Mrs. Dawson, who was mixing dough for more bread, stopped and looked around. "Wait a minute," she said, wiping flour off her hands onto her apron. "Where's Rusty?" Her voice sounded worried, because Rusty was always outside the bakery door, wagging his tail and saying hello to everyone. "He never leaves his spot," she said, her eyes getting big. She dropped her mixing bowl and ran to the window, peeking outside. But Rusty wasn't there. His spot by the red door was empty, and the ground where he usually sat looked cold and lonely. Mrs. Dawson called out to her husband, "Honey, have you seen Rusty?" Mr. Dawson, who was wrapping up a big pie, looked up and frowned. "Rusty? He's outside, isn't he?" he said. But then he saw the look on his wife's face and knew something was up. He put down the pie, wiped his hands, and stepped outside, calling, "Rusty! Rusty, boy, where are you?" His voice echoed down the street, but there was no happy bark, No wagging tail, no big German shepherd running toward him. Rusty was nowhere to be found. Mr. Dawson scratched his head, confused. "This isn't like him," he said to Mrs. Dawson, who had followed him outside. "Rusty never runs off. He loves being here." Mrs. Dawson nodded, her heart starting to beat faster. "Maybe he chased a squirrel," she said, but her voice sounded shaky, like she didn't really believe it. They both looked up and down the street, calling Rusty's name over and over, but the big dog was gone. Little did they know, Rusty was in big trouble, far away from the bakery, all because of mean old Mr. Grimsby. Meanwhile, someone else was starting to notice something strange. Someone very small. Someone who couldn't talk much, but who had big, curious eyes that saw everything. It was little Lily, only 18 months old, the tiniest member of the Dawson family. Lily was the Dawsons' youngest child, and oh boy, did she love Rusty more than anything in the world. She loved him so much, she'd giggle every time Rusty licked her face, his big, wet tongue tickling her cheeks. She loved him so much, she'd even learned to say woof, before she could say mama or dada. Isn't that funny? Lily thought Rusty was the best dog in the whole wide world, like a big, furry superhero who kept her safe and happy. Right now, Lily was playing in her stroller near the bakery door, just a few steps away from where Rusty usually sat. The stroller was parked outside so Lily could watch the people and the birds and the squirrels running by. Mrs. Dawson had given her a little toy to play with, a squishy ball that squeaked when she squeezed it. But today, Lily wasn't giggling. She wasn't squeezing her ball, either. Nope, her big, curious eyes were watching something strange, something very, very strange. See, Lily had seen Mr. Grimsby sneak by with Rusty. She didn't understand what was happening after all, she was just a baby. She didn't know words like mean or danger or bad guy. But she knew one thing for sure, her best friend Rusty wasn't where he was supposed to be. Usually, Rusty was right there, sitting by her stroller, wagging his tail and looking at her with his big, kind eyes. But now, Rusty was gone, and Lily had seen that mean man with the rope taking him away. Her little baby brain didn't know what it all meant, but her big baby heart felt something was wrong, really wrong. Lily's tiny hands gripped the edge of her stroller, her fingers squeezing tight. She looked around, her big eyes searching for Rusty, but he wasn't there. Then, with one big push, using all the strength in her tiny arms, she tipped the stroller over. Crash! The stroller hit the ground, making a loud noise, and Lily crawled out, her little knees moving fast on the dirt. She didn't care about her toy or her stroller or anything else. She was determined to find her dog, her best friend, her Rusty. Mrs. Dawson, who was still outside calling for Rusty, heard the crash and spun around. "Lily," she shouted, her voice full of worry. "Where are you going?" She ran toward the stroller, her apron flapping, but Lily was already crawling away as fast as her little knees could carry her straight toward the railway tracks on the edge of town. Mrs. Dawson's heart jumped into her throat. "Lily, no. Come back," she yelled, but Lily didn't stop. She didn't even look back. Her tiny hands slapped the ground, her knees pushed hard, and her big eyes were locked on the path ahead, like she knew exactly where she was going. Here's the scary part, folks. At that exact moment, a loud, deep sound echoed through Maplewood. Toot toot. It was a train whistle, far away but getting closer. The 3:15 freight train was coming, and oh boy, was it coming fast. The ground started to shake a little, and the birds in the trees flew away, scared by the noise. That train was big and heavy, with a loud engine that roared like a monster, and it was speeding straight toward the tracks where Rusty was chained. Poor Rusty, all alone on the tracks, started to bark and pull against the chain. His big paws scratched at the ground, his strong legs pushed hard, but it was no use. The chain was too tight, wrapped around his body like a snake. Rusty barked louder, his voice full of fear, but no one could hear him over the wind and the birds and the far-off train whistle. Time was running out, and Rusty was stuck, all because of mean Mr. Grimsby's nasty plan. But here's the big question: what do you think happens next? Will Rusty escape? Will Lily make it in time? Oh, I bet your heart is beating fast right now, just like mine. This story is getting wild, isn't it? Drop your guesses in the comments below. I'm dying to see what you think. Do you think a tiny baby like Lily can really save a big dog like Rusty? Or do you think something else will happen? Tell me, I can't wait to hear your ideas. And if you're loving this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends. The train whistle grew louder and louder, echoing through Maplewood like a big, scary monster roaring in the distance. Toot toot. Toot toot. The sound bounced off the trees, the houses, and the hills, making everyone's hearts beat faster. Rusty, chained to the tracks, was in big trouble. His barks turned into desperate howls, loud, sad cries that said, "Help me! Help me!" He pulled and pulled against the chain, his big paws scratching at the ground, but the chain held tight. It was wrapped around him like a mean, metal snake, and no matter how hard he tried, Rusty couldn't break free. Mr. Grimsby, the meanest man in town, was hiding behind a bush nearby, watching it all. His eyes were shiny with a nasty kind of happiness, and he smirked to himself, showing his yellow teeth. "Good riddance," he muttered, his voice low and sneaky. He thought his plan was perfect. He thought Rusty would be gone forever, and no one would ever know it was him. Oh, how wrong he was. But then out of nowhere a tiny figure appeared on the tracks. Guess who it was? It was Lily. Yep, the tiny, giggling baby who loved Rusty more than anything. Her little hands were covered in dirt from crawling so fast, and her cheeks were bright red, like two little apples. But her big, curious eyes were locked on Rusty, like she could see nothing else in the world. "Woof," she squealed, clapping her hands, her voice full of excitement. Rusty heard her and barked even louder, as if to say, "Lily, help me. You're here." Mrs. Dawson, running behind, screamed, "Lily, no. Stop." Her voice was full of panic, and her feet pounded the ground as she tried to catch up. But Lily didn't stop. Oh no, she was too brave for that. She crawled right up to Rusty, her tiny knees moving fast on the hard tracks. When she got to him, she reached out with her little hands and started tugging on the chain. She pulled and pulled, her tiny fingers wrapped around the cold metal, but of course, the chain didn't budge. She was just a baby, after all. But here's where things get crazy, really, really crazy. Lily's cries and Rusty's barks were so loud, they caught the attention of a group of workers fixing the tracks nearby. These were big, strong men with tools in their hands, working to make the tracks safe. One of them, a big man named Tom, looked up and saw the baby, the dog, and the chain. His eyes got wide, and he shouted, "Holy cow! There's a train coming." The other workers turned to look, and their mouths dropped open. They could hear the train now, roaring closer, its whistle screaming through the air. Toot toot. The workers dropped their tools, clang, 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 and sprinted toward the tracks, their boots pounding the ground. Tom, the biggest worker, grabbed a crowbar, a long, strong tool, and ran faster than he ever had before. With only seconds to spare, he jammed the crowbar under the chain and pried it loose. Pop! The chain fell off Rusty, and he was free. Another worker scooped up Lily into his arms, holding her tight, while a third worker pulled Rusty away from the tracks, his big paw sliding on the dirt. Just then, the train roared past, missing them by inches. Whoosh! The ground shook like an earthquake, the whistle blared so loud it hurt everyone's ears, and the wind from the train blew everyone's hair back. But guess what? Everyone was safe. Rusty, Lily, and the workers, all safe. And Mr. Grimsby? Oh boy, his smirk vanished faster than ice cream on a hot day. He peeked out from behind the bush, his face turning white as he realized his plan had failed. He thought he'd won, but oh no, he was in big trouble now. And here's the best part. Lily, still in the worker's arms, turned her tiny head and pointed right at Mr. Grimsby with her little finger. "Bad," she shouted, her baby voice loud and clear. Yep, a baby had just exposed the meanest man in town. Everyone turned to stare at Mr. Grimsby, their eyes wide with shock, and his face went pale as a ghost. He knew the game was up. After the train roared by and everyone was safe, the workers knew they had to do something about mean old Mr. Grimsby. They couldn't let him get away with such a bad thing. So, one of the workers, Big Tom, pulled out his phone and called the police. "Hello, police. You need to come quick," he said, his voice loud and serious. "We caught a bad guy trying to hurt a dog." It didn't take long for the police to come. Their cars zoomed into Maplewood, their lights flashing red and blue, and their sirens going wee woo, wee woo. The whole town heard the noise and ran outside to see what was happening. People peeked out of their windows, kids stopped playing, and even the birds stopped chirping to watch. The police jumped out of their cars, their shiny badges sparkling in the sun, and marched right over to where Mr. Grimsby was hiding behind the bush. Mr. Grimsby tried to run, his feet slipping on the grass, but it was no use. The workers pointed at him and said, "That's him. That's the bad guy." The police caught him red-handed, which means they saw him doing something bad with their own eyes. Turns out, this wasn't the first time Mr. Grimsby had tried to hurt someone or something to get his way. Nope. The police knew all about him. He had done mean things before, like scaring people's cats and breaking things in the park, but now, he was in big trouble. The whole town gathered around, watching as the police put shiny metal handcuffs on Mr. Grimsby's wrists. Click, click. The handcuffs locked tight, and Mr. Grimsby couldn't get away. "You'll pay for this," he shouted, his face red and angry, but no one felt sorry for him. Not one bit. Everyone in Maplewood was happy to see him go, because he had been mean for too long. While the police took Mr. Grimsby away, something wonderful was happening on the tracks. Rusty, now free from the chain, was so happy, he couldn't stop wagging his tail. Swish swish, swish swish, it went faster than ever. He ran over to little Lily, who was still in the worker's arms, and licked her face over and over, his big, wet tongue tickling her cheeks. Lily giggled like crazy, her tiny voice filling the air with happy sounds. "Woof," she squealed, clapping her hands, and Rusty barked back, as if to say, "Thank you, Lily. You're my hero." Mrs. Dawson, who had finally caught up, ran over and hugged the workers tight, tears streaming down her face like little rivers. Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaky but full of love. "You saved my baby and my dog." The workers smiled big smiles, their faces red from running so fast, and said, "Just doing our job, ma'am." From that day on, Rusty wasn't just the bakery's guard dog, oh no, he was Maplewood's hero. Everyone in town talked about how brave he was, staying strong even when he was in big danger. And Lily? Well, she became the town's littlest legend, the tiniest hero anyone had ever seen. The Dawsons were so proud, they put up a big, shiny sign outside the bakery that said, "Home of Rusty and Lily, Maplewood's bravest duo." People would come from all over just to see the famous dog and baby, and the bakery got even busier than before. As for Mr. Grimsby, he was sent to jail, where he couldn't hurt anyone or anything ever again. And guess what happened to his boring old store? The town turned it into a dog park. Yep, a dog park. It had green grass, fun toys, and a big fence so all the dogs in Maplewood could run and play safely. Every time Rusty ran around, his tail wagging like crazy, it was like he was saying, "Take that, Grimsby. You lose, and I win." Oh, and one more thing, guess what Lily's first real word was? Not mama, not da-da, but yep, you got it, dog. Every time she saw Rusty, she'd point and shout, "Dog," and everyone would laugh and cheer. It was the perfect ending to the wildest day in Maplewood. And there you have it, folks, the incredible story of a German Shepherd, a baby, and a town that learned a big lesson. Wow, what a wild ride, right? We saw Rusty, the big, strong dog, get into big trouble, chained to the tracks by mean old Mr. Grimsby. We saw little Lily, the tiniest baby, crawl all the way to save her best friend. And we saw the workers, the police, and the whole town come together to make sure the bad guy got what he deserved. But you know what? This story isn't just about a dog and a baby. Nope, it's about something much bigger, something super important that we can all learn from, no matter how old we are or where we live. Here's the big lesson: sometimes, the smallest heroes like Lily have the biggest hearts. Think about it. Lily was just a baby, so tiny she couldn't even walk or talk much. But did that stop her? No way. She crawled all the way to the tracks, faster than anyone thought a baby could go, just to help Rusty. Her heart was full of love and bravery, even though she was so small. That tells us something amazing: size doesn't matter when it comes to being a hero. What matters is what's inside your heart, how much you care, and how brave you can be when someone needs you. And here's another lesson: sometimes, the ones who seem the weakest like Rusty turn out to be the strongest of all. Rusty looked like he was in big trouble, stuck on the tracks with no way out. But did he give up? Nope. He barked and pulled and stayed strong, even when things looked scary. And in the end, he became Maplewood's hero, loved by everyone even more than before. That shows us something super cool. Being strong isn't just about muscles or size. It's about not giving up, even when things are hard, and trusting that help will come if you keep trying. So, here's my question for you: who's the hero in your life? Think about it for a second. Maybe it's a pet, like Rusty, who makes you happy every day and keeps you safe. Maybe it's a friend, someone who helps you when you're sad or scared. Or maybe, guess what, it's you. Yep, you can be a hero, too, even if you're small or young or think you're not strong enough. Heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and they show up when someone needs help, just like Lily and Rusty did. Drop your answer in the comments below. I'm dying to hear who your hero is. And hey, if this story made you smile or maybe even cry a little, hit that like button right now to let me know. Stories like this are all about making us feel big feelings, right? And if you want more stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, full of surprises and heroes and happy endings, then hit that subscribe button, too. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Remember, you never know when a hero might show up, even if they're crawling on tiny knees, like little Lily, or wagging a big, happy tail, like Rusty. Heroes are everywhere, and maybe, just maybe, there's a hero inside you, waiting for the perfect moment to shine. So, keep your eyes open, be brave, and always help others when you can. See you next time, my amazing friends. Stay awesome and keep being heroes.